The moment I pulled the curtain aside, I realized what was hiding behind it was not just a child, but a secret waiting to be released. Gary, Indiana, September 14th, 1963, backstage in a small auditorium where dim yellow lights cast a dull glow on the old wooden floor. Still remember the coldness of the old fabric curtain slipping through my fingertips every time I tried to touch it. The curtain was more than just a barrier to light. In our childhood, it was also something like a door between two worlds. One side was where my brother and I stood waiting to appear. The other was a sea of spectators whose breath was enough to make us shiver. But that night, it was like a fragile boundary between peace and storm. Michael, 5 years old, had been hiding behind that thick fabric for nearly an hour. I could hear his rapid breathing, each breath rising and falling as if each inhalation brought with it a pang of fear. And I stood nearby, my small bass gripped tightly. The backstage was so quiet I could hear someone's fingernails scraping against the wooden drum in the corner. The air was tight, cramped, and thick. I felt like I was in a room where all sound had been swallowed up, save for the boy's frantic heartbeat behind the curtain. The stage light filtered through the edge of the curtain, painting his face with trembling yellow streaks. Michael held onto one edge with both hands as if letting would bring the world crashing down on him. And I was only a little taller than him, but in that moment I felt decades older, for I had to witness such great anxiety for such a small body. And I went closer and whispered, "Are you okay, Mike?" He didn't answer. He just shook his head slightly, his lips pressed together. I could see his small shoulders shaking. Sometimes I thought of it as a baby bird being held in my hand. One strong movement would send it flying away in panic, or worse, unable to fly at all. Behind us, the band was adjusting its rhythm, pounding away. The clanging of metal was faint, but in this atmosphere, each sound was like the zipping of a zipper in a tense investigative film, something that made people shiver even though nothing was really happening. I looked out the crack in the curtains. Hundreds of faces were out there, blurred figures under the white lights, nervous, waiting. They had no idea that the character they were about to see was standing just a few feet away, but it felt like a chasm of emotion. The auditorium was silent. No one spoke, no one moved much, but I could feel the tension in the crowd like an invisible current running through the air. What choked me more was not the silence of the audience, but Michael's silence. He was always playing with his mouth, always humming along to the music, always moving his feet as if the music were flowing through his veins. But that night he stood still, frozen. I bent down to his eye level. The light filtering through the curtains made his eyes glow a strange orange. In them I saw fear, but not ordinary fear. It was like being caught between wanting to come out and wanting to disappear, an internal struggle that no one else but him could resolve. "Mike," I whispered, you don't have to do anything. Just come out and listen to the music, like home." He shook his head again. The curtains swayed slightly with each breath he took, as if perhaps if the fabric itself were trembling for him. And the more I watched, the more I sensed that what kept him from coming out wasn't just fear of the crowd, but fear of himself, afraid that the music inside him, the one we could all see clearly, might be too loud, too strong for a 5-year-old boy, afraid that when he came out, he would never be the child behind the curtain again. And I wanted to say something to pull him out of the darkness of emotion that was gripping his mind, but my throat tightened. I was just a child. How could I know how to save others from their own fear? Then I felt a breeze behind me, a signal that the band was about to start. I turned to do. The curtain in front of him shook more violently, not from the wind, but from the first bass test beat, deep, thick, like someone's heart had just pounded against it. Michael jumped, took a step back. His grip was so tight. I was afraid he'd tear the curtain. In that moment, I felt like I was seeing a much larger story, a part I didn't fully understand, a giant drama in his mind where every note of music was a piece of the puzzle that pulled him forward, but fear held him back. I put my hand on his shoulder. Michael, listen, the stage doesn't require you to be perfect. It just wants you to come out. His eyes shifted to me. There was a storm inside. I could feel it. Not a destructive storm, but one waiting to be unleashed, but he didn't know if he was ready. The stage lights grew brighter. The curtain in front of us dimmed and then flared like a white wall, ready to open at any moment. Everything was so tense that I felt like a sharp breath would blow it all away. And then he whispered softly, his voice as small as the wind, "I'm scared." I squeezed his shoulder harder, gently, but enough to let him know he wasn't alone. I know, but you don't have to face it alone. And the curtain moved slightly. Michael closed his eyes. The whole room held its breath, and I, his brother, stood there in the middle of that moment, completely unaware that what happened next would change everything. The first drum beat sounded like a slash through the stuffy air of the backstage. All the stage lights came on at once, creating cold streaks of light through the curtains, shining directly on Michael's tense face. In that moment, I felt like the world was spinning around him. Outside, the audience began to murmur. The whispers overlapped, but I could still hear a few words clearly, enough to make the air as tense as a string. "Is there a boy in the group? Will he dare to come out?" Nay? Wow. Can someone so small sing? Those words were like thin blades that slid through the curtains, touching Michael. I felt his body stiffen. He huddled against the curtain as if hoping the fabric would shield him from all eyes. I moved closer, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mike, just breathe. I have you here." But it didn't look at me. Its eyes were fixed on the crack of light in front of it, where the shadows of the crowd's heads merged under the spotlight. Each movement felt like a shadow falling on it. I'd never seen it so scared. The band's music grew deeper and more rhythmic. My guitar, leaning against the wall, vibrated in a bass frequency, a reminder that time was running out. The air behind the stage gradually thickened into an invisible fog, filled with a gathering pressure. I heard someone walking by, someone clearing their throat, the faint sound of wires against steel. It all created a mysterious soundtrack, a kind of suspense that made one think something was about to go wrong. And then Michael suddenly made a sound, a short, broken whistle, very faint, but clear enough to pierce the rising music. I jumped. It wasn't a happy sound. It wasn't a child playing around. It was a sound that felt like it was letting go to catch itself before falling into the darkness inside. I was about to step closer when something unexpected happened. The band heard it. The drummer, always sensitive to strange sounds, changed the beat slightly, but enough to make the tiny whistle part of the opening melody. The guitarist on the right followed suit. Then the keyboardist adjusted the harmony. A completely new beat, a strange, winding, and somehow mysterious began to spread across the stage. I turned to look at Michael. His eyes widened, and not with fear, but with surprise. The beat, it was strangely familiar. I recognized it immediately. It was the beat Michael whistled unconsciously when he stood by the kitchen window every evening when no one was looking, and the beat it made when something deep inside, something we never asked about, never touched. Now that beat playing in front of hundreds of people became the soul of the show. As casually but hauntingly, I felt that moment as a shift in the atmosphere, a turning point in fate. Michael, hiding behind the curtain, looked toward the light with mesmerized eyes. His breathing slowed. The hand holding the curtain went from tense to trembling. "Mike," I whispered, can you hear that?" He didn't answer, but I knew he did. The curtain undulated with each bass beat, and then I saw Michael's shoulder jerk with the beat. It was a small movement, but in this numbing tension, it was like a knock on some door in his mind. The audience outside sensed the change too. The noise from earlier died down. They began to pay attention, and people tilted their heads, leaned forward, trying to understand why the band had changed the beat. The silence stretched. It made me shiver, an unnatural silence, like before something broke. I stood next to him, feeling like I was in the middle of a case where all the clues were still unsolved. Every movement of Michael was a sign. Every beat of music was an invitation, and every breath in the room seemed to be waiting to see if the boy would come out. I put my hand on Michael's back, ready to push him away if necessary, but my fingers had barely touched his shirt when Michael took a half step forward, very slowly, very small, but it was the first step since he had hidden behind the curtain. I froze. The light intensified, lengthening his shadow on the wooden floor. The beat of the music twisted the air, making it feel like the whole stage was calling him. The audience seemed to notice a small shadow moving behind the curtain. A small "oh" echoed from the front row, like the wind signaling an approaching storm. My heart pounded. Michael tilted his head toward me. The light cut his face in sharp, light dark. His eyes were no longer just fear, but an agonizing struggle between stepping out and disappearing. And the bass pounded. Michael was startled, like the audience held its breath, and me, I knew the next moment would decide everything, not just for this show, but for something larger that had been silently stalking my brother since long before we entered this cramped room. The bass sounded a second time, deep and heavy, like the footsteps of a giant approaching. I felt the wooden floor beneath my feet vibrate slightly. I didn't know if it was the music or my own heart pounding so hard. Michael was right beside me, but in that moment it felt like he was somewhere else, somewhere between light and darkness, between fear and something mysterious rising inside him, a neutral zone I couldn't touch. I said softly, "Mike, if you don't want to." I didn't finish. He whistled again, clearer this time, sharper. A whistle that carried a strange hesitation and determination. And the band, as if led by an invisible signal, followed immediately. The drum beat changed, and the strings jerked. The keyboard stretched out a winding melody. The whole hall seemed to have changed to a new soundtrack, one that a 5-year-old was controlling from behind the curtain. I turned sharply to look at Michael. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. He didn't blink. He didn't seem to hear me anymore. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, as if something was calling him there. Not a human voice, but the sound of that very rhythm, the one he'd been attached to since those quiet evenings at home when the kitchen light cast a dull yellow glow on his cheeks and he whistled incoherent beats that no one understood. Today, those beats weren't incoherent anymore. They were pulling him out of his hiding place. The curtain swayed gently with each step Michael took as he unconsciously took another half step forward. My hand was still near his shoulder, but I didn't actually touch him because I felt like if I touched, I would interrupt a strange flow that even I didn't dare to interfere with. The music from the stage gradually became a living entity. I heard the audience start to stir. "What's there? I see something moving. Is that the baby?" The words spread like taut strings, tightening the air, raising the drama to the point where a single strong, breath would cause everything to explode. Michael raised his hand, letting it fall from the edge of the curtain. His fingertips trembled in the pale yellow light that filtered through the gap. It wasn't just a simple movement. It was the expression of a war going on inside. I saw his lips move. He whispered something very softly, as if talking to himself. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." Before I could react, a sudden sound rang out. A guitar strum, long and drawn out like a perfectly lit fuse. Michael was startled, but he didn't back away. On the contrary, He took another half step. I saw clearly the boy was being sucked out by the music. It was as if an invisible string was wrapped around him, pulling him away from me, away from the darkness, away from the curtain, the thing he had clung to like a lifeline all evening. I tried to pull him back with words, "Mike, slow down, let me go first." No, he didn't hear me. He was listening to the beat. The curtain billowed as a gust of wind blew in from the stage. For a moment, I saw Michael's shadow against the fabric, a small, trembling, defiant shadow, a speck of light about to burst through its own shell. Then suddenly a murmur spread through the auditorium, a cacophony of noise rising. The audience sensed something was coming, something no one was prepared for. I knew that if Michael stepped forward now, just one step, it would change everything, not just for the show, but for him and for us. But I didn't know if he could handle the change. On one side was the light, the applause that could erupt at any moment. And on the other was the fragile safety of the darkness where he had been standing. I called to him again, desperately, "Michael." He blinked, his hand contracted, then opened, and a decision was being made. I saw the moment clearly, like a slow motion scene in a thriller. And then Michael took another step, the last step before he reached the edge of the light. The room seemed to stop moving. Many people stood up. The music paused for a beat. My heart sank, because I knew in this moment, in this second, not Sueb, not me, not anyone else, Denaik. And the music had chosen Michael. It had drawn him out like destiny. And I just stood there watching my brother drawn by a force I could not compete with. The curtain began to open. The curtain opened as if invisible hands were pulling it open. I still didn't know if it was the wind, the beat of the drums, or Michael's own decision that caused the movement. Everything happened so slowly, it was almost surreal, as if time was compressed, ready to burst at the next moment. Stage light poured through the gap, pouring onto us like a stream. Half of Michael's face was bathed in that dull yellow light. The other half remained in darkness. I suddenly realized this was the moment that divided his two selves. On one side, the timid child hiding behind the curtain. On the other side, something was awakening inside him, elusive, inexplicable, but strong enough to make him step out. The murmur of Merto grew louder and louder. Eyes from outside swirled through the curtain gaps like hundreds of flashlights scanning the darkness, trying to find out what was happening behind the scenes. I heard someone say, "Someone is coming out." A chill ran down my spine. Michael stood just a foot away from the light. His hands were slightly clenched, his fingers trembling as he tried to hold on to the air to keep his balance. I could feel the struggle in him clearly, not in his words, but in every little movement. His breathing slowed, his shoulders heaving, his eyes wide and unblinking. I lowered my voice, "Mike, if you're not sure," but the sentence was cut off, not by me, not by Michael, but by the guitar that struck at that moment, my strong, sharp, full of resonance like a summons. Michael froze. His whole body shook slightly with the guitar, as if each layer of sound touched a mysterious string in his heart. Then, without warning, he stepped out, not running, not dashing. He was as if we're being pulled by an invisible force, the force of its own rhythm. I saw it sway, its small hand leave the dark air behind and sink into the light ahead. When its hand touched the light, the auditorium seemed to shatter. A loud "oh" echoed from the front row. Then the sound spread like a wave, followed by the sound of chairs shifting, someone covering their mouth, a gasp for air. No one thought a 5-year-old child could step out of that heavy darkness. I stood behind the curtain, breathless, watching my brother in the light that made him pitifully small, but strangely strong. Michael stood in the middle of the stage, a tiny figure in the sea of light. His head was slightly bowed, his shoulders were still shaking, but his legs steady. The auditorium was dead silent. I swear I could hear the strings vibrating in the air. Then Michael lifted his head, just that small movement, but it made the audience hold their breath. I held my breath too, because in his eyes, it wasn't just fear, anymore. It was something mixed with confusion, longing, and something very deep, like he was seeing a path that no one else was seeing. The musicians unconsciously held the beat, waiting for the boy. None of us were prepared for this moment, but that very unpreparedness made it a silent explosion. Michael opened his mouth. I sensed it before he spoke. His breathing changed. The whole room leaned forward. No one knew what was coming. And then Michael spoke, not loudly, not like a bell. It was a soft, slightly trembling voice, but so real it sent chills down your spine. No one expected it from a child who had been terrified just seconds before. The audience froze. I stood still. The music below, originally intended to accompany the opening, became the background for an unexpected moment. Michael's voice seeped into every crevice of the stage, into every chest of the audience, then hit me like a invisible blow that made my hands tremble. I saw clearly the entire audience was being carried away by this 5-year-old boy. A woman in the front row raised her hand to her mouth as if she couldn't believe what she was witnessing. A man tilted his head, frowning, not in doubt but in surprise. The music, the thing that had pulled Michael away, now became the thing that supported him, holding him steady as if he was meant to be in this exact position. I clutched the curtain, my heart pounding in my chest. And this wasn't just the first stage appearance. This was Michael Jackson's awakening, and at the same time, a small part of me felt like I was losing something, not my brother, but the right to think I understood him. Michael looked into the light, and I realized with a shudder that from now on, the light would understand him better than anyone. The first clap rang out like a bolt of lightning through the compressed air, then a second, then a third. Before long, the entire auditorium was like a white wave crashing onto the stage. I stood there dumbfounded, watching hundreds of hands clap together, creating a resounding sound that made the curtain behind me shake. Michael stood there, small but still holding his position, as if he were listening to the world breathe as one. The light shone heavily on him, casting a long shadow on the floor. The shadow was fragile but somehow strong and inexplicable, like the shape of something I'd yet to name. I stepped out of the darkness, closer to the edge of the curtain, but still not brave enough to step into the light beside him. I didn't know why, only that in that moment I felt like I didn't belong where Michael was standing. And not because I didn't deserve it, but because the light seemed to be taking over in a very special way. And the band behind me stood still, and the guitarist remained in the middle of a change, as if he had forgotten. The Kamas sat still, his hands still on the drumhead, not daring to move. Everyone knew if they missed a beat, it might break the strange moment that had enveloped the room. Then Michael turned to look at me. Just a glance, but it made me feel like someone had just squeezed my heart. It wasn't the same look as when he hid behind the curtain. There was no fear, no struggle, no trembling. Instead, there was a stillness that was terrifying, a kind of stillness I'd never seen in a 5-year-old. It was like the look of someone who had just found a place to belong and knew that going back would not be easy. I tried to smile. A smile that was both proud and sad, because I realized that moment had taken Michael from us, not in loss, but in difference. The audience roared again, louder. Many people rose from their seats, cheering. Who was that boy? Unbelievable. Oh my God, 5 years old singing like this? I heard everything. But every word passed through me like a distant sound. The only thing I felt clearly was the change. Michael bowed. A simple gesture, but the room exploded again. I had never seen a child control the emotions of the crowd so unconsciously. And I went to him, put my hand on his shoulder. His shoulder was still small, thin, and warm, still the Michael I knew. But when I leaned down to whisper in his ear, I heard his breathing steady, rhythmic, no longer erratic like when he was hiding behind the curtain. I said, "You did well, very well." Michael just nodded, saying nothing, but in his eyes, again, I saw something that chilled me. He wasn't surprised to be applauded. He was surprised that he had just done it, not proud, not arrogant, but like he just realized he had a door inside, and tonight that door had swung open. The curtain behind me began to close as the show ended. Its sliding sound was slow but sharp, like a knife cutting the world into the light outside and the darkness backstage. When the fabric met, the light was just a narrow slit. Michael watched the line of light until it disappeared completely. Then he turned to me. No words, just look. I put my hand on his head, stroking it gently as usual. But unlike usual, he didn't rub his head against my hand. He just stood there. A silence fell between us, not a silence of fear or confusion, but a silence of something new taking shape. I heard the musicians behind me sigh in relief, someone chuckling softly as the tension faded. But I couldn't breathe because deep down I knew this curtain would never close the same way again. And Michael, my brother, would never be the same boy hiding behind it again. The backstage grew darker as the stage lights dimmed. Michael walked inward toward me, but I could still see the light reflecting off his hair as if the stage lights were still following him, refusing to leave. I suddenly felt a beat skip for the first time. I understood that there are moments in life that not only open a door for someone, but also close a door for those standing beside it. I knew that tonight would change the future. It's mine, my family's. But from that moment on, only one thing was certain. And the light had chosen Michael, and whether I wanted to or not, you would have to learn to live on the edge of that light. In